All right, this is Troy Larson, founder of Coda Magic, and we are here on our first episode of Meet Your Makers. And we are here with someone I'm very excited to meet, Blessing Richardson, and I will give her a little quick introduction. So Blessing is a Nigerian-born, Texas-raised tech strategist and an active pack developer, one of my favorite pack developers. She is on a mission to make seven-figure micro businesses the new norm through systems automation and micro tools. With a background in software engineering, she transforms high-ticket services into productized offerings, leveraging Coda Packs to empower B2B agencies in digital marketing, leadership upskilling, and SaaS. In today's digital landscape, using automation, AI, and data is no longer a competitive edge. It's the bare minimum. That's so true. Blessing designs value-driven apps that prioritize the human experience, integrating Coda into her low-code builds, both her own projects and her clients' needs. I love someone who works on their own personal projects. Her core belief, with the right systems, small teams can achieve mighty impact, allowing Davids to compete with Goliaths in the business arena. Love that. Welcome, Blessing. Great to have you. So you have a software development background. You want to talk a little bit about your, how you got into technology and kind of how you got educated?
Oh, for sure, for sure. That's the first time I'm hearing that intro. That's a lot.
That's awesome. I love it. Very well done.
Thank you. I believe it in every part of that, honestly. So my background in technology, I taught myself how to code before middle school. And then by the time I graduated high school, I had a freelance business doing web design, graphic design, looped in some photography there. And then went the software engineering route when my dad, who is an engineer, I told him I wanted to be a graphic designer and I was going to go to Full Sail, which at the time their tuition was like $80,000. I didn't know what $1,000 was, to be fair. And he printed that out and he was like, okay, well, how about you look at the salaries of software engineers and compare that? And I said, bet. At first I was like, I don't know if I want to be an engineer. You're an engineer. But then I saw those salaries and I said, well, I already do half of that. Let's just go that route, right? And so that's how I kind of got my formal education in software engineering. But all the while in college, with my freelancing and with a lot of the nonprofit volunteer work I was doing at the time, I kept realizing the way enterprises approach systems and automations, and I was employed at a cloud company, right? And so this is just a whole other level of seeing what automation and workflow is, compared to how, me and my friends in our small organizations, we were just struggling to centralize our work on project management tools, let alone building automated systems. And so seeing this tension really throughout my career, whether it was side projects or small teams and large organizations, made me realize the projects that went really, really well, they didn't have a lot of this logistical stuff where the systems weren't right and that people weren't leveraging tools to do more work. Even in my software consulting gigs, we would have some team leaders who would say, everybody update the spreadsheet, even though someone's already paying for Azure DevOps or Jira. We were doing 2 or 3 forms of reporting when we could have only done 1. And by implementing simple automations, I realized I was relieving friction and even how we did things in that context. And so, I just became very passionate about leveraging tools to make it easier for us to show up and do what it is that we set out to do. Nobody does this to push buttons unless it just really makes you happy. And if so, you can make a lot more money if pushing buttons make you happy. Because there are so many people who are scared of pushing buttons. And so that, I think, is where I really lean in with small teams and some of the teams I work with, because we shouldn't have people who are scared of using tools that are made for business users, right? I hear the language oh, that's so technical. And where I hear business users throw up the word technical is essentially, I don't know how to do that, and there happens to be a computer screen in front of it. Not necessarily, this is actually a technical bit where we do need a technician or an engineer, right? And so that is a big thing for me, which is coming into these small teams and saying, no, this was made for you. You need to own this and you can own this. But the parts that require that technical expertise, let's definitely take that off your plate.
I've had the same thing throughout my career. Why do you think so many business leaders are content to just do the spreadsheet and take several hours to do something that could just be done so quickly? Even when they're presented with that option, Why do they push back on that?
I think it's the same reason why we'll stop to automate something, even though it takes 3 days to automate it. But had we done it one time, it would have taken like 20 minutes. I think we prefer to use the tools that we're comfortable with, right? The difference is, I think in a digital arena, we have an advantage in that we might spend the 3 days in doing something, but then maybe the next time I do it, it doesn't really take 20 minutes. It's going to take like an hour because I'm actually testing the automation I built. Then I'm going to fix it the next time. It might take me 45 minutes. And then by the end of 2 weeks, yes, the thing that you asked me to do that we both knew was an hour, I will consistently do in less than 5 minutes, right? And we see that arc in that horizon. And oftentimes we're asked to do, I wouldn't say it's like, it's disengaging work. It's just not sexy work, right? And so we're even more motivated, I think, to automate the pain away in that way. Whereas business leaders, and this is something I've learned about leaders too, working with more of them, is that the tool is often an impediment to the thing that they have to get done. So if I have to stop to learn a new way of doing things, when, bringing it down to dollars, my time per hour is not worth the learning most of the time. That's really what they're fighting when they look at it from that perspective. I think what they miss, especially when their organizations are not mature in this digital transformation arc, right, is that unfortunately you are leading by example with your teams. And so if you say you do want an organization that is data driven and on the, using technology to its full extent, when you opt out of that process in any form, so does the rest of your team. And so unfortunately, even though it might cost you more in your time today, that cost that you think you're shortcutting, you are paying for exponentially in the future.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I think it's getting their buy-in to understand, no, you actually do have to slow down business, which is something that people always freak out about. And it's like, no, you do. Because if your organization is not actually what I like to call tech adjacent, or they're not tech proficient, and you're dealing with more tech allergic people, then this is a whole shift in how they value what they do and how they approach what they do, and understanding that using the tool is part of your job. You have upskilling. You can't just train your team now. You have to get them to reorient about what is valuable about what I do, and then why must I change the way I do it?
I think there's a lot of comfort in predictability, in knowing that I've been doing it this way and it works. And if I continue to do it this way, it works. And I think that also you have some not good automators, not good developers who have done things that break. And when things break, especially automation, when they break, you have a lot of managers who go, yep, see, I told you, I knew this wouldn't work. We should have just stayed with the spreadsheet. We should have just stayed with
but breaking
the
is
long
good.
way around.
Breaking is good, because if I know where it breaks, I can fix it. The problem is if everything is in Blessing's head and Blessing leaves, you have nothing to reference and piece back how I did it, right?
Yes.
And while I think very, very small organizations and small teams, you are made on the people that you have. But the language of SOP is becoming almost prolific in small business and small online business, is because at some point you realize that your business is as good as your systems, and your systems are as good as your people. Yes. And to some degree, you will never be able to remove that human element and touch, especially when you're dealing with things that require that, right? In consulting, where there is a human element. But the button pushing, the data shoveling, right? That's not actually what you're hiring people to do. It's just a consequence of doing business in this day. So why continue to waste resources and capital and letting that be the thing that slows you down? Because ultimately leaders want scale. They want scale and growth. And so I think once they start to understand that, which I think is on us technologists to make that easier for them to understand in business sense, like time, capacity, and cost. What is revenue lost and not becoming efficient? That's harder thing. It's really hard, I think, to articulate. But when I find that we're able to make that pitch, it's a lot easier to get a yes out of a leader versus, well, everybody just wants to use the cool tool that looks pretty with buttons. And sometimes it's the leader who wants the pretty looking tool, and then you break your organization.
I love
and don't realize it. So it goes both ways, right?
So you've landed on Coda. Now, how much is Coda part of your solutions?
Coda is an interesting part. I think many of my clients are new to Coda, and so it's usually me bringing it in to replace a tool in their stack. I think that's where I see more people say yes to Coda. And I tend to engineer docs in a way that remove a need for a Zapier sometimes. Maybe that's slightly over-engineered. But I realize with Coda Packs and the way that the pricing works, you're not limited by how many actions you can run in a doc if you architect your doc to use buttons and automations, right? And you're not limited by how many different apps you can integrate in one. And so I think Coda shines in automating tasks and processes in a way that it might be harder to achieve in other systems. And that's where I think I get people in. The other arena that's becoming more popular is creating custom client portals and creating a space for client interaction where this interaction was never going to happen just over email anyways. So kind of taking out everyone who's like, no, my client just needs email updates. Well, then you don't probably need a portal to begin with. Yes. But for people who are like, no, I'm tracking a relationship with my client over months to maybe a year or so, there's back and forth collaborative dynamic, and the tool I'm using doesn't quite cut it. I need something that I can build to match how I work with my clients, and Coda also fits really well for that.
Now, you mentioned Zapier, using Coda as a replacement for Zapier. What's your business case for that with clients? So a client says, hey, we use Zapier, and you say, well, I have a Coda solution. What's the business value to them?
The way I pitch it is where if I want to manage process, which means I'm really managing data flow over time, it's Coda. Because in a Zap, you only ever see the data in that one run of time, right? Mm-hmm. I see that, the email got this label, and then I took that email and I, assigned it as a ticket in this support tool to someone, right? That's a snapshot in time.
It's a piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. But if somebody says, you know what, I actually need to see all emails that came in, and I really want to understand how many of them got turned into tickets, and then I want to know how long it took for us to respond back in email again. This is now a process. So where there is a time lapse or where there are KPI and metrics around it, then I take a data-driven approach instead of an action-driven approach, and then I go for a Coda doc instead.
And then for people that don't know about the pack infrastructure that Coda provides, so what value does that give in terms of creating these solutions in your docs?
Oh, well, there's so much.
Let's focus on the automation. So, someone has someone is using an email tool like Brevo or ConvertKit. Using Brevo because I know you wrote the Brevo, and they're using Zapier to say, okay, I want to send an email with Zapier. Whenever I get a new order in from my website, I want to send out or kick off a welcome sequence through Brevo, and they're using Zapier for that. So why would they want to move that to Coda?
Well, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I think that's my first thing.
Or I guess I should say, how would you use a pack in that case, or how do packs provide value in Coda?
In that scenario. Again, people's resistance to pushing buttons sometimes, I find that, even though Brevo has templates, right? I could be dealing with a team. Oh gosh. Okay, this is really clicking into view because I'm remembering a similar scenario. So hear me out here. Seat management and cost management is an interesting lever, I think, in these scenarios where maybe you have, a Brevo account and you're limited by how many people could be in their tool, or your team is in a way where you really don't want non-marketing people inside of Brevo because, again, I don't know how Brevo works. This is not normally where I'm here. I just need to update the email template, right? And it's not even a whole template. It's really a snippet. We just need to update a snippet of a policy. And it might be easier to make those snippets available in a Coda doc that any user feels comfortable, because it's like a Google Doc. Any user feels comfortable going in and tweaking this little paragraph, right? It could even be policy clauses that you have your legal team consult on, right? And you're like, oh, well, because of the life cycle of this snippet, how it goes through review, it goes through all these things, maybe the final destination of this shouldn't live in Brevo because of how my team works, right? And Coda makes it more approachable. And then, it doesn't cost you anything to have 100 team members in Coda, because you only ever have 2 admins in Coda and you pay for your admins. And so the moment we say, oh yes, we can create a workflow that makes it easier to manage these parts of communications that are changing, right? That you don't want to put everybody in Brevo into because it doesn't really make sense. And so now we can have those snippets in a Coda doc. By the way, since the snippets are here, it might be really helpful to sync the sublist of your CRM that needs to get this information into Coda too. We draft that information, send that over to Brevo to run it through an automation sequence, but we pass that little clause as well, right? We say, Brevo, go send this transactional email to this contact, use this clause as a merge field, and send it. And so now you have more of your team almost is included in this system. at the same time. Right?
I love this. I think you've really honed in to me on one of the most powerful pieces of Coda and the pack infrastructure is that, like you said, applications, I don't want my team necessarily to have access to the app. And let's hide the app. They need access to a process. And like you said, there's no reason for them to log into Brevo. We don't need another tool always. I just need the email. I need to review, whatever the content. So I can do that in Coda, and everything is in Coda. Like all my other stuff is in Coda anyway. So it's just, I'm already using Coda, but it does such a fantastic job of allowing you to segregate your tools and kind of hide the complexity. Or, from a security perspective, I don't want people mucking around in there and browsing emails or email addresses. So we give them just what they need to see in Coda. Yes.
A couple of months ago, I did a demonstration of Coda for a talk explaining like how you might model a member cancellation process in a Coda doc, and how the ticket comes in and we track the tickets. And then, you might then pass that ticket over to somebody in IT, your IT person, and say, hey, go now process that cancellation in Stripe. But I think that's a weird motion for businesses, because it's like your IT person probably knows how Stripe is integrated to the rest of your business. What they might not understand is your cancellation policy. So is hitting that cancel button really a responsibility of the IT person, or is it the responsibility of your customer success team, right? And so I did a demo where, technically, we can bring Stripe right into your membership cancellation tracker, and we can even put rules in place to say certain users can actually hit that button, right? Certain conditions have to be met before we allow you to hit cancellation. And then now we don't need an IT person to press the button, right? Your customer success person understands the customer history. They understand what needs to happen here. They've tried remediating the relationship with the customer and realized it's not working. They can hit that button, right? And IT gets to put some security protocols in place to make sure that the cancellation runs in full, meaning that we cancel it in Stripe. We send a templated email to the person telling them it's canceled, right? All that can be automated in one Coda button through a couple of packs. And then IT, what does IT do? They get to not be brought into the day-to-day of membership management, but they actually get to look at all your systems and focus on improving your process and your systems, because now they're not looped into business processes that really just need a button pusher, right? And the person who pushes the button knows why it should be pushed.
Now, you mentioned Stripe. That's a great one. I think that's a fantastic use case. So I go to Coda, okay? I'm hearing Troy and Blessing talk about packs. I go there and I find the Stripe pack. It doesn't do something I need. What would you do?
Well, I would build another pack.
Okay, so wait a minute. Are you telling me that we can build duplicate packs in Coda? We
For
don't have
sure.
to use? Okay.
Are we? Maybe I'm going to put the Coda team in a weird place here, but like when you look at the pack specifications, there is a way somehow to create another pack that associates to columns and buttons in a different pack by specifying a pack ID. So I haven't tried using that to almost extend another pack, and I'm sure they would probably say nobody told you to do that or try.
Yeah.
But I do know from a functional standpoint, it's the same API, right? It's just that it doesn't make sense for every pack to expose everything in an API, especially one like Stripe that's so rich. It's like, why would we make all 20,000 options available? But if you're looking at this and going, no, there's a very specific thing I need to happen here, that's where I'd reach for a pack. And I think with businesses, I go the step further and say, well, if you know in your business that every time you run a cancellation, certain things need to happen, then I would argue it makes sense to almost make a custom cancellation button, right? Because now it's not just going out to Stripe. You might need some other things to happen. We might want to check, maybe it's the history in Stripe. It's like, wait, have you run a cancellation, 3 months prior? Right? Or how many times have you canceled in some of our services? It might make sense to develop a custom pack that begins to enforce all these rules and policies. And then you just put that into the doc instead of managing 15 buttons and formulas in Coda directly, right?
That's such a powerful aspect of building packs. And so if people here aren't familiar with packs, it allows you to write custom code to extend Coda in limitless ways. And you'll often find packs in the pack marketplace that maybe are missing a feature. When you build packs or how I do it, I'm assuming you do the same way, Blessing, is you kind of build what's needed. We just don't have the time to build every single API call, unless it's something we want to do, or we want to build like the complete pack. But typically we're going to build packs, I think, that are based around the current or most common needs, and then listen for customer feedback. And a lot of times there are existing packs that people have built for clients that don't do everything that we need. And that's the beauty of Coda, is we can build another one. You know, there could be 5 Stripe packs in the marketplace. There's nothing wrong with that. There's no limit to that. So I think it's just amazing how we can extend. There's no other tool like that, I think, that offers that same kind of rich extension that you can so quickly share with other people in the community. So what is your right now, like what's your big initiative right now in terms of Coda? Are you building any packs right now, or are you working on any?
Well, big initiatives in terms of Coda. I think there's 2 packs. We're going to talk about one today, but so we'll lead with the other one that I'm not going to get into because I think it's really cool. I was working on a project for a client, and she was leaving her software that she uses to manage her wedding. She's an event planner, and so she does weddings. And she was really frustrated with the interface, and clients had issues using it. And so what I did was create, I think I call it Coda Factory. I might have to rename it because I've used that name somewhere else in my fun little ecosystem. But I created a pack, and its job is to make sure that when I create almost a child doc from a parent doc. So setting up a parent-child relationship where the parent doc has like a database of all the child docs.
Right.
And so essentially the parent doc for her was her master wedding planning doc. It had all of her jobs in it, essentially. And then when she wants to start a project with the client, she clicks a button, and that creates a isolated wedding planner just for that client, right? And I realized with the ability to hide pages in Coda, it makes it really cool because you can create like an admin panel in the client doc where you can go in and make all these data changes, essentially, and then the client keeps their client-facing pages, right? But then that page is hidden, and then it's a little annoying to go to like unhide, hide. But now we have sync pages, right?
Yes.
And so with this fun little pack I have, we spin up the client doc, and then we take the admin page inside the client doc and add it as a sync page back to the parent doc underneath a page. Yeah. So there's like a whole control panel tab, and then underneath it has all of the pages that are essentially the admin page in each of the child docs. And so she has one place where she can use all of her jobs, and then in the sidebar she can go, well, I want to see Blessing's wedding, and it says Blessing. And you click on it, the same project name, you click on it, and it takes you directly to the admin page of the client doc.
So you have a page for each client. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And is that pack a private pack, or is it?
It's a private pack, I think. Okay. And I know we've talked about this before. With the asynchronous nature of Coda, it made that really tricky to make sure like the pages showed up at the right time after it was done. And so it might be something I kind of throw behind maybe another API and make available as a tool, because we do want that to be a bit more synchronous. And so right now I'm still testing that. When it's smoother, I'll be comfortable releasing it. But yeah, we could do a whole episode on client portals and how to design them in Coda, because that's a real big hot topic right now, and it can be challenging. Let's talk about that. So what would you say is probably the biggest pain points of creating client portals in Coda? The biggest pain point, I think it's fighting the nature of Coda. I think most client portals, though, that are made a non-client portal software are usually fighting the nature of the tool. Because most client portals are creating this sandbox of really filtered views. I want to show you exactly what you need to know. I might need to give you some aggregate insights, like, your project has 30 tasks. We finished like 15 of them, right? So it's an element of dashboard and reporting and like really fine-tuned filtering. And so now you're hitting dashboarding and security, which are 2 very mature functions of any product, right? So I think Coda buckles where most other collaborative project management tools buckle. And it's like, you should really only have data in the space that everybody who has access to the space should see. And if in my Coda doc, I'm managing multiple clients, well, it's kind of counter to a portal. So I think Coda buckles where everyone else does, which is we're creating slices, sliced views of the data. And then we're all kind of trying to stick it together and not incur another SaaS fee by paying for yet another portal builder, because we don't also want to be like this pseudo no code product owner, because now owning the client portal is technically a little mini business of itself, doing updates and tweaks. And I think we want all those things to blend together really well. So I don't feel like I'm spreading myself across 15 tools and paying for too much. And so, yeah, I think the natural failings of Coda there is the same thing with, ClickUp as a portal, and all these Asana as a portal. It just kind of fails. And clients don't like more tools, actually. They want you in their ecosystem, not the other way around.
Right.
And so even I'm kind of reverting on my own portal kind of setup to say, okay, well, what if the portal is just a recurring email where you get every week, where it's just what needs to be done, what has been done. Here's a link to view, like, maybe your invoices or something, like, just with a standard footer. What happens if the email is essentially the portal? Because clients do not really love being pulled into yet another tool.
Yeah, I think portals, that's a great point. I think client portals are helpful if there's a reason for me to go there to do something.
Yes.
But I think you're right. I think an email, my gas bill, water bill, I get an email, here's your bill. Like,
yep.
It's automatically paid. I don't need a portal unless I'm actually going to go in there and cancel or change something. There's not real value to that. Mm-hmm. So a lot of time we can spend a lot of time on something that clients may not even want. And so, yeah, I like that mindset of, is it a portal sounds great, but is it something that they'll even use?
Right.
Okay, so yeah, let's talk about a topic you mentioned to me, which is prototyping in Coda. If you want to, can you talk a little bit about that, what that means?
Yeah, so the Pack ecosystem is really great because essentially it's a way of taking an API and plugging it into Coda, right? I can use a Pack to create a table, and now it's a native table in Coda. I can add buttons, and they're there. I can add column types, and my data is there, right? And so Coda makes it really easy to take third-party data and bring this into this app in a way that feels like it's all in Coda. And so with that, I realized as somebody who, tinkers and does a lot of integrations, which is really where I started with this form of consulting. It was somebody who said, I need to integrate these apps. And I'm like, oh, there's APIs. And they're like, what's an API? And I'm like, say less, right? We can stitch this together. And I think Coda presents an interesting proposition because it is now an interface for APIs, right? And so my whole dance into no code as somebody who, yes, I did front end, but I was really good at back end. And so when I look at any no code tool, the question is, can I actually outsource my UI to you? That's just how I approach it.
Yes, that's a great way to, I love that phraseology. Yes. Outsourcing the UI. That's
it, because it's like you're solving what is really 90% of the iceberg that is the user experience, right? And then I think backend is where you're solving the 90% that is the business use case, right? And so I look at Coda and go, okay, well, if I can put all of my business logic behind an API, then Coda is my front end, and it works really well. And so I use Coda to prototype different types of different tools and gadgets. Sometimes it is, I want to create an API. So here's something that doesn't have a pack. Somebody wants to make it. I don't think Flowdesk has a pack. And something I noticed, even though Flowdesk now has an API, so Flowdesk has an API, they're on V1, ever so often on threads, you'll see somebody mention, like, it's really hard to pull emails, like get an export of my emails out of Flowdesk. So at some point, I'm sure they're going to produce a native feature. But here's the thing. Their API already gives you all of your data. So all you need, the front end for your Flowdesk export tool, is a Coda doc that pulls all your contacts with a button that says, put this in a Google Sheet, right? And now you have automated backups and exports of your emails. And so it's just seeing the problem that way. It's like, okay, you're asking for a solution and you're probably going to want this to happen more than once. So it's not just a one-time data migration, right? We can pull that data from Flowdesk, give you an interface to run this export, not only just at the click of a button, but then you can send an automation to say, well, click the export button every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Or better yet, every Monday at 9 a.m. Or I really want this to run hourly. I want to export all of my data hourly. So long as you don't hit API, rate limiting, you can pull that data as much as you want. And so that's kind of how I see it. And I think for me right now, I, like everyone else, was intrigued by AI. what is this AI thing? Well, it's machine learning, but is it like the same as what we know? And I think it's fair to contend that OpenAI making AI almost a household conversation and making it a consumer concept. I think we should give them kudos for that because, this kind of machine learning was not really accessible to consumers ever. I don't think so ever before, really, at least not in this mass. And so now that that's in play, even I'm thinking, well, how do I make my own little assistant? It's 2024. Many people are downsizing their small businesses. And I even had a virtual assistant a year or two ago. I think I had one and really ran through two and then found one that I loved. And then we had to just split ways because life. And now I'm like, well, I kind of want an assistant, but I also know my business is not running at a place where I need a full-time executive assistant. Like we're not there. So how could I leverage AI to kind of get me there? And so I'm using Coda to prototype what I call Pappy. And it's only called Pappy because it's personal API, right? So
I love it.
I also think it's cheeky, so, call it Pappy. And Pappy's name is my personal API here. And I've created a Coda Pack where I can essentially take any page or row in Coda, send it over to my API, and then I have a custom GPT on the other side that lets me now query for my data. And so I can be in a chat. Yeah, I can be in a chat and say, hey, pull my latest podcast episode, write an email, and then I added some functionality that lets it draft a Gmail email for me. So I can say, okay, now send it over to Gmail, make it a draft.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's just thinking about what are the kinds of interactions that I might have used a VA to do in the past. And yes, well, I'm going to spend some time doing it. Well, can I alleviate all the brain power figuring out what to say, how to say it, whatever? Can I just move data from one app to another? But what really actually inspired me to do this was when I tried Coda AI and was very annoyed that I hit a token limit and didn't realize I was going to hit one. And then I was like, wait, hold up. How am I going to start using AI, become dependent on it, and then get hit with these token limits? I'm like, this does not make sense. And so instead, that was the main reason why I started tinkering with this architecture and then realized, you know what? This actually has many more benefits beyond just paying for how many tokens I want. There's more functionality here that I can build into how I run my business.
And I want to demo this, if that's okay.
Oh, for sure.
But before we do that, you mentioned a really important point, which is using Coda as a front end to APIs and basically saying either I don't like the way the application itself works, or the application is missing some key features that I'm going to actually create in Coda using their API.
Which is like the cool part of it. It's not that Coda doesn't work and therefore I have to leave. It's how can I customize this to make it work? And I think in many other closed ecosystems, you'll hit some of these walls and go, I can't do anything anymore. And that's where you then decide, am I going to keep putting bandages on this, or do we migrate? And the Coda Pack ecosystem is like, well, you could keep Coda as the front of your workflow, your systems, your team interactions, and where you collaborate. But then you can really bring in, some really heavy guns at the back and say, okay, great. This is how I want this to work. And we're going to build something to specification to get it to do what I want.
Absolutely. All right, let's take a look at your ChatGPT doc. I'm excited to see Pappy.
Okay, let's go. Yeah, so I lovingly call it Pappy internally, but in ChatGPT, it's called Sam. So, it is what it is. All right. So what I have here is a table of episodes. And so I have newly started a podcast/newsletter. I feel like I'm an auditory person. And I'm like, I don't really want to sit down and write newsletters, but talking them has been great. So I decided to create this flow where I write my newsletters and I publish them to Substack. Awesome. But the value of a content library, this is something else I'm noticing trend more a little bit in my feed and threads, where writers are talking about having a content library, which is one place where you kind of archive all the bits of content that you write. And I think with AI and having your own slice of AI available to you, it's even more powerful. Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I said, well, if I'm going to start this journey, I might as well be organized enough. I can't predict a year from now, but I can get started putting my content somewhere. And so what I have in this Coda doc is just tracking the number of the episode, the title. I keep like a file prefix. So when I name my files on my hard drive, my Canva images and stuff, at least they're named consistently. And
Yeah,
so make it
absolutely.
really easy to just copy it and then use it. I track the Chat GPT thread in which I am working on any kind of editing and revision.
Oh, great idea.
And then the studio link, which is for Riverside. So we're using Riverside right now. I use Riverside to do probably any formal recordings that I have. And so just keeping that here because I can easily go back and get the export of my audio later. And so that's here as well. I copy the SEO description. And then I realize it's really easy if I just make the instructions in Coda, if I have that be my prompt. So instead of me remembering to write the SEO description, I just have a prompt here that I'm like, okay, I've given you my show notes and we've written it. Now just write my SEO description. And so it makes it easier for me to copy paste. I have my Canva assets, which we can do a whole nother conversation on the Canva API because I've been waiting for years for this and I'm annoyed that autofill is not available. Okay. And I try to hack around it. And so this is here anticipating that Canva, you will approve my request for your autofill API. And then I can have a flow where once I've decided on the title for my podcast, I can just hit a button and then all of my graphics are created. And you know, I'm one person right now. I don't have a design team helping me edit this. Of course, there's a vision. I used to do like video editing and all the other stuff too. So I have goals, but like those goals are not today. So being able to automate creating those covers and cards and the social graphics would be everything. So that's why that's there, and we'll get there eventually. And then the show notes. So I have a transcript, and I get to use AI to write the show notes. And Riverside's AI does write the show notes. And they give you the chapters. And so that's a good starting point. But if I don't love the show notes, I can still go back to ChatGPT and do tweaking. And so by tracking the show notes here, this tells me, one, I can just copy paste it into my hosting app. But then two, this tells me everything I need to know about this podcast episode. And so I have my show notes, and then I track the public link. And then this is really supposed to be the internal editing link. But for now, it's the same link. And so if I need to edit the published version, I can quickly get to it. And so this is just a hub of my podcasts.
Awesome.
Yep, and it's working. It's evolving. It wasn't this nice like 3 or 4 days ago. So it's evolving, you know, as we go here. Which, you know, sidebar, if you as a leader if you as a leader have a business and you have a team, right? Having at least one and maybe even two people who just think this way, they think about streamlining and doing systems, give them the room to organize information. I think that's the first thing. Maybe we hold off on deploying automations and all these things that are a little bit harder. But if you give your team the creative freedom to think about what's the best way to organize our information, you're going to get this kind of output more often. And then automation is a natural next step. And so just sidebar, give your team the freedom to be creative with how they organize data.
Yeah, I love that. Just lay the Legos out on the table. Start
Yes.
playing, and then don't start wiring things up yet. let's get it all kind of situated how we want it. Play with it. Then we start wiring it in.
So this is where my Fun Pappy API gets some wings here. I created a Coda template where in any doc, I can either add in or start with this base page in a way. And in any Coda doc, I have a table named docs, and I can add docs and set the scope of those docs. And so I can say this is a personal doc, it's a company doc, and then is it a customer doc? And so that makes it really easy for me to kind of shove different kinds of data into the API, but then control what comes out in ChatGPT based off of your API key. So my API is locked by an API key in security. Even if you see the Pappy domain, which you will, there's no point in trying it. You don't have an API key. Okay. And this helps to filter this based off of what user is logged in. So when I set up the pack, I log in as me. And then what's the scope of the document? And so we can add these docs here and then hit a save or sync button and it shoots it off to the API. Any questions?
Yeah, so explain how scope works.
Yes. Scope essentially is what I say. This is a company level document. It's a personal document, or it's a document about a customer.
Okay, and how does that affect the interaction with the pack?
It just gets passed over with the document when I send it over to the API, right?
Okay.
And so that shows up more in ChatGPT when, let's say if I were to hire somebody externally from my company, I want to hire a VA. but you should not have access to certain client documents.
Okay.
Then I can actually give you a GPT with an API key that will not give you my client information, but it will give you my company policies.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's really where it pans out on that side. And then I can title any document. I can put the content. And so these are just some, this is an old version of some content strategy that I had floating around. And so I have said this is a wiki document. This is a tag for marketing strategy. It's company scope. So anybody who's worked with me internally can see what are our content pillars, and then have a description here. And so that way on the GPT side, if I say, hey, what are my content pillars? It knows exactly what document to pull. Or I can say, find me everything to do with marketing strategy, and the tag will lead that way.
Awesome.
And so that's what that is. And so while you only see 2 docs here, right, now I decided to sync all of the knowledge docs. And so this is really fun. So to make this very simple, we're going to go back. The docs are a native Coda table. This is me pushing data to the API. The knowledge docs table is a sync table, essentially showing you what I have in the API. It's pulling from the API into Coda, right? And so regardless of how many Coda docs I have pushing data in, I'm always able to see how many knowledge docs I've actually sent.
I love it.
Yeah. And so I have a couple different company docs here. And again, because I use ChatGPT, I have like instructions on how to write a call script. And this is particularly, it's like a format and how I want it laid out and formatted with examples. And so if I do a testimonial call with a client and go, that 1-hour consultation was great, I want you to write a call script that mimics that, but format the call script like this. And so it knows to say, okay, we're going to mimic the opening greeting of the call. We're going to format all the questions of the call, the question and answer flow. And then you're going to give me reminders on how I should close the call.
And then how do you, so you've got the knowledge base built out. Then how are you actually accessing or running queries against it?
So that's where things get fun. The Pappy Pack page. Okay. So behind the scenes, all these buttons I'm pressing, these are some of the things I made available to the pack. And so we have the ability to not only see knowledge docs, but templates. I do have a separate concept for templates. The ability to add templates, add knowledge docs, update them, and delete them. So this all happens in Coda. Now, behind the scenes with the GPT, we now have actions. And so my API gives the GPT a way to pull all of my templates, get a specific template, pull the bot instructions, which is a hack I'll come back to. If I needed to pull client projects, if I needed to pull my brand identity, which is a fun, specific query I wrote, because a lot of times I'm writing copy, sales copy, marketing copy, or I want you to communicate something in a way that matches my company values. And so I have just one action that says, go find every doc that was tagged as a brand identity doc. And then I tell it to go read all those docs, and then now come back to me and we can do this whole session where we shape up my copy, right? And then those fun Gmail things. So of course I like to write emails because I don't know if you like to write emails, but it's more fun now, right?
Yes.
And I can tell it to say, well, let's pull this last thread that Troy and I had. And now I want you to write a response that kind of matches the thread of conversation.
Oh, cool.
And so we have a little bit of that. And with the idea of having templates and a brand identity, now I can say, pull my email template, tweak it to match my brand voice, and then draft a response that makes sense, and then save that response as a draft in Gmail. And so I kind of figured out what are the things I would really have an executive assistant do, honestly.
This is a perfect use for packs. It's really about building exactly what you want Coda to do, or exactly what you want to do in Coda. And this really shows the level of granularity and control you can have over the behavior in Coda. This is one of my favorite aspects of Coda.
Oh, it is. It is so mind-blowing. I think especially when I explain this to clients, and most of my clients are not technical. Like very seldom do I work with other people who have like software engineering backgrounds, who are even engineers in general, let alone software engineers, right? Very rarely do I work with people who are other engineers, and it's mostly everyone else who's like very tech curious. I do have labels. I have categories for my personas here. People who are tech curious and go, I know this can be better. Like this could be better, but how can we get there? And that's when people usually come to me. And it's cool because once we get your ideas out of your head, then it's like, okay, we can make something that solves that problem. But when I know why you want it that way, we might be able to solve other things as well and give you something that's a bit more robust. Same amount of time, same amount of effort. We just ask better questions to get the work done.
And for people who aren't as familiar with packs, what's important to understand here is the get brand identity, get templates. Those are simply formulas in Coda. You don't have to learn coding. Like, you're just adding more formulas in Coda. So if you can write formulas in Coda, you can use Coda Pack formulas. It's the same thing.
I mean, that's it. And so I've mirrored all of this functionality too as API endpoints for the GPT. So it's really cool because now it's similar both ways. The API is similar both ways. It feels familiar. And then when I write my bot instructions, I'm just telling it, hey, like, this is when you need to run these operations. The same way I might do this in a Coda doc. And so I put this here in case anybody was curious to know, like, well, okay, so I can write an API that's in Coda and a GPT, but like, how do we tie them together? And it's like, oh, here, you kind of tell the GPT with context. Like, when would I press this button? Well, if I needed to retrieve all my email templates, I would hit the get templates button. So now I have a get templates action, right? And kind of coaching the GPT through it. And so I have an explanation of like what the GPT can do. These are my instructions, like, okay, some scenarios a little bit to give it an idea. And then this is where things fell apart with GPT. It was when I wanted it to be a little bit smarter. Everything down here was like, okay, technically I'd have to train you for you to be smarter about when it makes sense to get a template. So I don't have to tell you explicitly, right? But this is where I'm at. So operations, instructions, and just as an example, I came in here and said, hey, how many podcast episodes do I have? And it found the 2 of them, searched all of my docs and found them. And then I said, great. So write an email announcing episode 1. And we have an email. And I'm like, this isn't so bad. It's a really great email. I'm excited to share the latest episode of my podcast with you. Okay, great. And then I said, well, I want you to go back and read my bot instructions. And so again, it's going to call that API endpoint that's going to get all of my docs that I've tagged as bot instructions. And then it says I'm ready. And I hate when ChatGPT is told to do something and just dumps everything back at you. And so in my bot instructions, I said, whenever I tell you to read the instructions, just say you're ready. Like, don't spit it back out. And so now I say, great, revise the email in my voice. And so go ahead.
What I love about this is, we talk about, we've heard a lot about Coda Brain. I've not touched Coda Brain yet and how you can put stuff in there. But really, it's Chat GPT really is a conversation. And I think this really lends itself well to that interface. I don't know how Coda Brain is going to work. I think it could be great at pulling out data, but really, it's a tuning and it's a conversation through the thread. And I've seen that. I have tried some different ways to just generate things in Coda using AI, and the first one's never good enough.
Right.
The second one is a little bit better, and then you have to just kind of hone in on that. And so I end up going to ChatGPT and just working through the conversation. This is phenomenal.
That's what I noticed too, because it is, unfortunately with ChatGPT, it's not like we were all gifted this AI personal assistant that remembers the nuances of what we're trying to say. And anyways, even if it did, we'd be dealing with a whole different brand of AI, honestly. Like, let's be fair, we're not there yet. And so every conversation, you are kind of massaging it to where you need it to go. And what I find is the apps that, give you their own slice of AI, right? You don't actually circumvent the conversational part. You still have to massage and kind of get it to give you what you want. And I realize with this type of pack, I just need the data to go into ChatGPT. So that way we can jump into the conversational part of this. Like, it's going to end here anyways. So let's just go.
This is such a unique idea in that I think it highlights the fact that, our goal is not to just put everything into Coda and use Coda for everything and put all our buttons in Coda and everything is just inside Coda. Coda is a tool, and you're using it as a tool, as an extension of other tools. And I think this really highlights the fact that the real power of Coda is you're using it as a middleman to kind of push the data into your Chat GPT, but you're still using Chat GPT. You're not replacing Chat GPT. It's an extension of it. And I think that's a really, really clever use case.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I wish, part of me is like, yeah, I wish there was a function that said, hit a button and you do all these things. But to your point, the conversation is where you get the depth of what you want out of it. So I think bringing taking things out of Coda into where you really want them sometimes is really good. And then I have it on my little roadmap and backlog to add functionality to my GPT so that way data goes back into Coda. Because now that's full circle, right? I don't have to copy paste. I just say, hey, pull this document. Let's make these changes. Now save this document, right? And so I think that will complete the loop of I'm going to modify my show notes in Coda and I'll just go update it with the markdown and put it right back in and it's nicely formatted. And so, I do have my own little roadmap here, but there's only so much time. So
yeah, no, that's awesome.
Yeah. And so go ahead.
I love that. No, I just say I love the back and forth with Coda, with other tools. Like it's very fluid the way you have this put together.
I appreciate it because it was a 8-hour hackathon to do the first pass of this and write the pack. So it was like write the API, write the pack, write the API, write the pack, add the buttons. And I was really pleased with what I had. And so just putting about another week, maybe another 6-8 hours over the course of another week to get it to this point. And so it wasn't that bad of an investment, honestly, because I use it all the time now, right? And then I get my email templates and I do what I need to do. And Coda still is the source of truth. And I think that's one of the bigger things when I'm working with clients and we're talking about integrating data across tools and system stuff. The biggest thing that I would say is sometimes missing from the conversation is having a source of truth, right? For businesses to realize like there really should be an authoritative place where we go to see where everyone who's ever attended our Zooms, our public facing Zooms has been. There is a Zoom pack. And funny enough, one of the simplest things I implement for some of these teams, particularly those who have coaching businesses or people who use Zoom a lot to bring in new people into their business and their orbit, is just setting up a simple template that takes your Zoom events or your webinars and it will pull all of your attendees. And then the API with Zoom is a little weird in the way the pack is. And so you don't get like an attendees table. And so what I end up doing is setting up to where it pulls every event. It creates a copy of that event in an events table. And then it creates a row for every participant. And it pulls any data that we can. So if you set up your event the right way in Zoom, we can now track the emails, right, of who attended. And so I find this is a bigger ask for some of the former nonprofits I had who said we actually have to show who's showing up to our programs, our virtual programming, right? And so anybody who has an impetus to really report attendance, Coda can solve that for you. No, it doesn't even have to be like, oh, after every event, we have like Sonia who goes and clicks and downloads it. No, Coda will just pull it for you, update it, even add a button to put it in, your Google Drive and export it for you. And now you have automated event reporting from Zoom, right?
Just a little sneak peek. I'm actually in the process of writing a Zoom reporting pack. So against the reporting API for that data. Their approval process is a bit lengthy. The approval processes are the ones that slow me down. But there's so much data there, and I agree. Like I want the same thing, and I think that would be really powerful. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So is this something you're going to be publishing, or is this still personal for a while?
It's still personal. Honestly, this is a very rough iteration. And again, to the point of this conversation, I'm using it to prototype. The version of this that I kind of take out and make available to my clients will not be as rough as what I know this is, right? And there's something, you have to think about, well, if I have team members, this whole scoping idea, what data do you have access to? Will your GPT work for this? There are bits and edges of that, but this gives me a good foundation to kind of clone and say, okay, you want a private API for your business. What does that look like, right? And are we going to spend time building a full app? Probably not. You want it to bake into an ecosystem that you're already in. And this is why Coda is really good for that. I wish Notion would do something similar because so many people like Notion. I like to think about Notion for people who like to be tactile with their data. Like you enjoy the dragging, the dropping, the checking, and the clicking. Coda shines better for those of us who don't, right?
Yeah.
I need to see what my automated system is doing, but I don't want to be a part of the process.
Exactly.
Right? And so I think any platforms that allow that kind of flexibility, it's going to be really easy to take your personal business API with you and say, okay, my team is here. How do we plug this in? A part of my business is here. How do we sync the data away so that way we have a source of truth, really, which is your API at some point, that's moving all your business data where you need it to go. So it's definitely not like a packaged offering, but when I have clients who come to me and I say, okay, this would be a better solution for you, then I just kind of clone from what I have and we build on top of it.
Awesome. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I think this is going to be the first of many. I really enjoy talking with you. You're just so knowledgeable. Let me ask you final question, which I like to ask all the makers. What are 3 things you would change about Coda? If I could magically wave a wand, put you in charge of product prioritization, what would you love to see?
Oh, 3 things. Okay, one would be, get rid of that global search. It's just because sometimes with the way that we, slice data and move into other packs, or not other packs, but other documents here or there, there's so much duplicate information that I'm just like, the search is kind of pointless unless I know what scope to search for. So
exactly. Yeah.
And I would love it to look like on every table or even in a doc, I can say if this should be included in global search or not. And so if the table itself is not a part of global search, like don't index it, right?
Love that.
And then ignore any formulas that might use it, which I know is another level of product complexity. So that's fair. But I want to pull a table out of the search, or I want to pull a whole document out of the search. That would be great. So that's 1. 2 would be security and permissioning. I know we got a really good request through recently with sync pages and having more control over how you embed sync pages. So I'm not as frustrated with that, honestly. I do wish though with sync pages,
we're almost there. We're getting there.
We are. I think I would be more pleased if not only do you have a read-only mode, but do you have like a button-only mode, right?
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Because with the button only, it's like, yes, you cannot really change anything on this page, but you can do what I've enabled you to do through a button. And so that would probably be my second change. And then, of course, with packs, we've heard a lot of packs things to death. But the last thing I have with packs is, it's probably another 2. Instantaneous syncing for data in Coda. Like the time delay for using native tables feels really weird. And it's like you're doing just as much work as you would if it were a third-party integration. So getting rid of that is one thing. And then being able to add data and delete data very easily from sync tables, right? Because now the things that I might have to jump into a third-party app for it's much less. So for instance, if I'm using that Flowdesk integration, let's say somebody makes that pack, it's there, and I want to start a new email from within Coda. I've drafted the email. The team has gone through the revision process. Becky put in her comment. Jared put in his comments. We've all approved it in Coda. And now I just want to hit a button that says, okay, go create this email, right? Whether that's Lotus, MailChimp, or whatever. Then I would love to do that and then see it immediately in the sync table. Because if Coda is if Coda is the source of truth for my process, it then feels really disjointed to have to leave Coda, manually copy paste, put that into Flowdesk, come back into Coda, hit a sync button to make it aware that I've created an email, right? And then it just feels really disjointed. And so I feel like we're almost there. And if we could have the creation of data in Coda pushed to these packs and have almost that live syncing effect, then I would give a massive thumbs up for workflow start and end in Coda.
Let's hope that's coming soon.
Yes. So that's my makeshift wish
Those
list.
are awesome. So how can people find you? Is there something that you would like to promote, or you have a podcast? Do you have a newsletter? What's the best way for people to reach you?
blessingeffect.com. That's blessing effect with an E.com. And I really tried to get blessing.com a long time ago, but I think you can all imagine why that was not available. So you got to get creative. And if you find me there, that is where I'm posting my newsletter/podcast. Again, I find that I'm a very auditory person. And so I think that's where I'm going to live, and it's on Substack. So if you're looking for some place where every email is a newsletter and every newsletter or podcast is an email, it's all one thing, which I love. So it's Substack. And so just a little shout out there. But yeah, that's where you can find me. And then what am I launching? So I'm going to be doing Ask Me Anythings. And I think it's a good way to talk to not just technical people, but even business owners who are trying to figure out, okay, what is the next step in productizing my expertise?
Yeah.
Because I'm starting to really go deep with service owners or service providers and agencies that say, we do something really, really well. We have come up with a process. We have a methodology. Our clients love it. Like, we have clients. We want to do more.
That's awesome.
And maybe starting a community makes sense, right? But is there another way to productize? Maybe having a template shop makes sense, but is there another way to productize? And so I'm going in with service providers and trying to help them understand how to take your expertise and begin that product development journey to figure out, do I need this to be like a micro app where it's something that's only available to my clients, right? So that's something that shows up after we have an engagement. Or do I have an app that's a direct, to market play for a SaaS app? Or do I have an app that's a lead gen tool? People don't pay me to use this app, but they do use it. And now I have essentially an automated lead qualification tool for my business. And so I would love to talk to more service providers and figure out, where are you in this journey? How can we help you kind of pick apart the product ready ideas in your business, and then coach people through on how to get started? Because tech is full of a lot of people who make tech for tech people, but service providers are people who dedicate themselves to serving other people's problem. And I think we need them to make technology what I think it's really supposed to be, right? And so, yes, if you follow me at Blessing Effect, you will get information on when you can join me on our first Ask Me Anything.
Awesome. I'm excited. I'll be there.
Yes.
So great. It was great having you. And like you said, I definitely want to have several more conversations. There's so many topics that we can talk about. And I look forward to talking to you next time.
For sure.
Okay,
Thanks for having
Blessing.
me, Troy.
Okay.